Hello, thank you for joining me. This is What I've Been Thinking with Marcus Cage, and I am here with my good friend Emmanuel, other known as Blue Maverick, um, on Twitter. Today we have a couple of topics that want to talk about. I've kind of been away from things in the news, um, touch and go. I've kind of paid attention to some things here and there, but definitely excited to kind of get back into the swing of things. Emmanuel here to get me updated on what things I need to be abreast of that I've been missing out on. So, without further ado, what's been going on, Emmanuel?
Okay. Well, of course, the coronavirus, everyone who opened, I guess, first in regards to coronavirus, they are going up. The numbers are steadily going up. And I think, especially in my state, I'm from Georgia. And of course, one of the main concerns is that the mayor, Keisha Bottoms, the mayor
Mhm.
wanted, mayors like her in Georgia are enacting, like, you have to go out with a mask, like, no matter what, like outside store,
So
all of it,
mandatory mask.
mandatory mask. And Kemp, our governor, is not cool with that at all. So there's like this arguing contention about that. And then, still with the Black Lives Matter movement, we are seeing more, I guess not even in Georgia, but I guess across the country.
Hmm.
The protests have not been stopping, but there have been more news reports of them acting, I guess, acting in like violent and irrational
Yeah,
manners.
yeah. Let's go in a little bit more on that because that's something that I haven't been hearing much about. So,
Okay, so
kind of
there
elaborate
was
more on
one
some of that stuff.
instance where, of course, where Rayshard Brooks was murdered at the Wendy's, and then they started protesting there. Um, there was a little girl in the car, and she accidentally got killed by supposedly one of uh one of the Black Lives Matter protesters by accident.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
What do you know more about that information? Because I like briefly heard about that from like
it was
one of my
her
right
name
wing
was
friends, and I don't
I didn't.
I don't know enough
Yeah,
information.
I'm the same as you. I have a lot going on. So her name was Sequoia. The child's name was Sequoia Turner, and she was in like the back seat, and it was like a stray bullet. And I suspect it had something to do with what happened. I see. I suspect the correlation between stories like that has something to do with like what happened at Stone Mountain, where there was like a mass march of like this was on July 4th, where there was like a
Hmm.
mass march of like black people carrying guns marching down the street, and I'm just like, okay. I was like, the news is going to start painting him as negative really very soon.
Of course, of course.
And of course, you're starting to see more and more stories come up about, they're violent. They like to shoot, you say something they don't like, shoot first, ask questions later. And I'm like, all that's going to do is just incite the white people more than happy to have a reason to kill us and Black Lives Matter protesters in the first place. So I'm not, uh, I'm not a huge fan with it, but uh, I suspected that at some point that was going to start happening. When I saw them start marching down the street, I figured it was coming. I thought it would take more, I thought it would take less lead time. I thought it would take less lead time in that, let's put it like that. I mean, the speed in which the media is starting to paint Black Lives Matter as like the new terrorist is just, mainstream media is having like a field day with it. And, it's important that we have people like you and me speaking up and being clear and clarifying like what and clarifying what is going on, because like with any movement, there's bound to be some outside, there's bound to be some people that'll go too far, or there's bound to be some rogue operatives and
Outside
stuff like that. But
forces,
they do
or
not match the media. They do not match the movement as a whole. Okay, they you hear stories like that, but then they gloss over the fact that people have been run over protesting, people have died protesting. Those stories are glossed over. I mean, even, and I don't know the exact details of it, but there was one where this woman protester, she was getting choked out by the police, literally like in real time, and I saw like a glancing picture, right? I mean, it didn't even really get like enough time frame for me to even know who this Black Lives Matter protester even was. But I get like emails immediately every single time someone in the Black Lives Matter movement does something that the media can paint in a bad light. So
same here. I get the same type of emails and
right.
nonsense.
I mean, it's
And
quick.
it's
It moves with the speed.
and that's what I try to get across to people, that there's nuance in everything, and so there's always going to be bad apples in every single thing, good or bad. There's even good apples in bad. So I mean, just like the police force, a lot of them, I feel like most of the precincts, just their hierarchy in general, the way their captains are set up, all the way up to their commissioners, to the way the DAs, and the way a lot of the laws have been set in place are set to favor them to be negative.
Exactly.
And discourage for them to be positive. So when you get the Serpicos, who want to go out there and go against the grain and be the good cop, that's the exception to the rule normally. Now, granted, can you have bad cops do good things sometimes? Yeah, of course. I mean, we had some of these protests where you had they were literally out there marching with Black Lives protesters, were out there kneeling with the protesters, and then hours later they're gassing them in and rubber bullets and all that stuff.
And I've been discussing that earlier. Like, as far as the police and the media concerned, Black Lives Matter has become more of a performance piece than anything substantive, right?
Oh, completely.
Right. I mean, they kneel, they put up captions, and yet they fund the police in the background, or they're more than happy to gas and arrest protesters after kneeling with them or listening to their problems like maybe 2 hours ago. So we're continuously seeing that. We're continuously seeing that issue come up. Like, publicly, the police and the media are supportive, but privately, it's just you see like them trying to co-opt it and try to subsequently, stamp it out trying to stamp it out effectively. And the only nice thing about it is that they are failing. They look like hypocrites in the eyes of like the focus, in the eyes of like the focus media and stuff like that. So I'm inherently grateful for like everyone who puts in like the time and the energy to point out like, hey, Starbucks or whatever put up like a Black Lives Matter caption, but at the same time, they'll they funded the police. So that hypocrisy is, we need to start blatantly calling that out, because you're starting to notice that it just seems to be more like, it just seems like a real like performance piece. It's just all for show. It's for show and for
it's perfect. It's perfect that you would say that, because it segues into a couple of things that have kind of went on like back and forth online. Gotten into a couple little Twitter spats with people about different things, and what I've noticed a lot of people like to do is, if you say something which hints at a certain direction, they automatically take the next step to fill in the blank on what they believe that you are trying to say or do. And that case went on a whole lot, because with the whole ooh, let's go on ahead and throw caution to the wind, go on ahead and talk about some real stuff. The whole DeSean Jackson thing, because all of these things, in my opinion, will ease into it. And on our show, the Political Matrix, excuse me, we're really going to get in depth into some of these issues and talk about them a lot more nuanced. But for here right now, we're going to talk about it, a little bit more surface level. The comment which he made was offensive, yes. And it was, for one, it's not actually Hitler who made the quote. So Hitler did re-quote a quote from somebody else, but that's not originally Hitler's quote. A lot of these theories and teachings actually come from different theological beliefs within the New Testament and Christianity. And where the misconception I feel is coming in with most people is it's more of a theological debate that's going on. And if you are not well versed in the whole Jews versus Christian thing, then it just gets to, talking past each other, because one side believes they're right, the other side believes they're right. And so, what I try to get across to other people is, if you're going to have that discussion, you need to have the discussion on each other's footing. If you are a Christian and you want to have those discussions, then point out those references throughout, the different books which Jewish people believe in, and vice versa. And that was just some of the points which I was trying to point out to some of the people. And Julian Edelman, another NFL player, actually responded to him saying that he needed to take him to the Holocaust Museum and all that. Now, what I gained from the statement, though very crude the way it was put, there are unfortunate truths in there. Now, I'll be careful with the way I try to word this. When you're telling somebody that they need to go to the Holocaust Museum, that doesn't address even what he's talking about, because the statement is not addressing that the Holocaust didn't happen. That's in a lot of the complaints which I heard were coming at him from that direction. It's not addressing that the Holocaust didn't happen. It's not saying that Hitler didn't do all these horrible things. It's not even saying that Hitler's not horrible. All it's saying is that these are quotes that actually come from biblical texts, which say that there are people which will pose as Jewish people who are not. Now, those are not my words. Those are not necessarily even my beliefs. But I'm just telling you, as somebody who studied the different things, it does say that in there. So to automatically go after people who have adopted those beliefs, especially when you understand that there's over 30,000 forms of Christianity. I mean, so it can get wonky into what actually people believe. And now, when you start saying that you want to kill and maim and Jewish people are extorting, now when he got to the extortion part, that's when I can't follow you there.
When did this happen, by the way? I meant to ask you.
This happened probably maybe a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago now.
Okay.
And it was. I don't agree with, and see, here's my thing, which I was trying to speak to some of the people about. My understanding of ancient Africa and the Middle East, in that area, there were at least 12 tribes. It was separated from Israel and Judah. Judah was the 2 tribes in the bottom. Israel was the 12 in the top. Now, the debate between some theologians is if it is which people are the lost ones. Is it the 10 tribes from the top, which I am at this point, I'm just all ears to the discussion. But there are arguments which I hear very, very people who are much more knowledgeable than myself, who get involved and who, talk about. So, I want people to kind of push back on the whole everything is necessarily racist or anti-Semitic. Some things are just differences in beliefs. And it's not that you want hatred or harm upon anybody. Now, do I believe that there are people who are highly religious in power who mean to use religion in evil ways? Yes. Do I think that they are trying to hide things? Yes. Do I believe? Oh, definitely. And that's when it becomes up to us as individuals to start really digging into whatever sources that we actually trust, and to have an open mind and to have an open heart and listen to each other. Um, because I feel like once you start addressing some of those issues, because my current belief now is that I don't. It's not that I don't believe the Jews that we know of today are Jews. What I believe is there are more Jews that are out there who are not, and who are not, who I guess who are still lost. And that's my belief, that there are more that are still lost. And a lot of those, I believe, were, are in America today and through the African slave trades. I mean, when you start getting into history, it gets uncomfortable in many different ways. I mean, for instance, though the Jews were enslaved, though they were brutalized, there are many documents and records of Ashkenazi Jews owning slaves and fighting for the Confederacy. So, I mean, history is not simple and clean cut in any kind of way. There are evil Christians, there are evil Jews, there are evil Muslims, there are evil everybody. So, anytime we just jump out and want to pile upon somebody, I'm always want to push back a little bit on that, because I felt though his comments came out very, very wrongly, very poorly, and he should have added a lot more context into what he was trying to say, I felt pushback on him is very harsh.
Yeah, I mean that's the first time I had ever. That's something you knew that I didn't. I didn't even know. I didn't even know that happened. That is one of those clear examples where I am appreciative of NFL celebrities coming out and giving their voice and saying their piece, but sometimes you get celebrities even too, some celebrities I'm cool, I'm glad that they're speaking and giving their 15, using their 15 minutes or whatever to speak up or whatever. But some of them are just some of them are just, they just need to be educated. They just clearly need to be.
I feel the problem is they all feel that they are educated.
Right.
And because they've gotten a degree, they've told themselves that I know a certain amount of things. And because I'm in a certain demographic of people who have accomplished these certain things, that makes me somehow, my intelligence got me here alone. And one thing that I believe is, yes, it does require a certain amount of intelligence, skill, all of these things to get you to a certain area. But it also requires certain foundations and principles for you to help blossom in that success. You need to have people around who are going to be able to teach you, tutor you. You're going to have to be able to have those opportunities to train, to learn, to test yourself out. And if you don't have that nurturing environment, it is always going to, give you a disadvantage to somebody who has those things. Not saying that you cannot, because I'm in disbelief that there is no situation that's too dire that we can't overcome if we decide to.
I agree with you. Just more. I think there just needs to be more chances for being open-minded, more chances for discussion, more chances for education, more chances for people to be knowledgeable about what's going on and just not accepting what, someone famous or rich or powerful tells you. But, at face value. I guess less platitudes and more like like actual substance. I mean, it is a continuous annoyance with me, like with someone who has like 6 million followers on 6 million followers on Twitter, and they spread out some vast conspiracy theory that has no weight or no proof. And I hope we can move into a direction where celebrities who have big, powerful platforms can use that to educate themselves and be better people because of it. And there'll always be people like the person you spoke of that they're just clearly not there yet.
Well, therein lies some of the biggest problems. A lot of people, even if they're not religious, they kind of take on some of those ethics of the Bible in certain ways. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, things like that. And, that vanity, greed, are wrong, gluttony, overindulgence, all those things are wrong. Whether you're religious or not, a lot of people kind of just consensually believe those things. The problem is, the old, I don't know if it's a parable, I don't know if it's a statement, who came up with it, but, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I feel the problem is a lot of these people, because they have received so much success and so many blessings, that they have been able to tell themselves and convince themselves that it's all on them, that it's me, I did this. And so it starts to create a false narrative in your head that you are the one who are doing everything, that you never had any help. There wasn't this friend who might have said, you know what, I know you're failing calculus and I'll help you out and I'll do this test for you. You forget about all of these things. You forget about maybe if you had a child at an early age, you forget about that other family member who was watching the kid all those nights when you needed to study. I mean, a lot of these people get to a point where they get so detached from their bases and their roots, which brought them to where they are. And when you get to that level, people start focusing mainly on the murder, the killing, the stealing. But people stop focusing as much on the greed, the vanity, the overindulgence, and some of the other, deadly sins. And it's that vanity that puts them on that platform to let them just talk out of their ass any kind of way without actually doing any real research. Because that's kind of a crux which I've even come to with trying to put together some content. I'll do research and then I'll do research and then I'll do research. And then my own research might have me doubting some of my own theories before, which if you go to a philosopher like Descartes, Rene Descartes, he believed that you should look at everything kind of like, look at all your beliefs as if it's like a giant apple barrel. And I'm going to do a video on it later on, but it's like a giant apple barrel. And you look at each different apple, just like you look at your different beliefs and thoughts and different ways you process the world. And you just, it's not that you automatically throw away all your beliefs or that you automatically flip to new beliefs. It's you just re-examine some things. Because think about it like when you watch an old movie, how many times do you go back and see it completely different than you did, years previous? And it's because with that different wisdom and insight, we're able to see things a little bit more differently. And so if we only stay on those set concrete, beliefs or ethics that we believe we have, instead of going to re-examine them every now and then to figure, does this exactly make sense what I believe? Or do I really, really believe this? Or am I really, really representing these principles that I say I believe in? It's easy for a lot of us to talk, but the walking the walk part is what we need to try to focus more on. And instead of trying to call out other people for them not walking the walk, it needs to start with more internally. That's why, I've tried to kind of take a different approach at how I've even addressed people and, people with different belief systems, just trying to look at different approaches and not assume that I'm always right or that I have all the answers, you know?
I'll give you an example. I was on Twitter, I think it was a couple of days ago, and this video of a 18-year-old kid, he got pulled over or whatever, and he was obviously frightened. He was obviously scared, and they were putting it on tape and everything. And this white CEO that's following me, he's like, okay, he was just like spouting out all of like the rules and stuff of like what he should be doing with the cop. And I was just like, you're not understanding his fear of the situation. You are not understanding the terror that he feels in that situation. And he said that's got nothing to do with it. And it was one of those moments where I just had to like stand down and I had to like I had to like sit back and say, I cannot do this for every single one of these people who come in here like this, because if I did, I would burn myself out.
Exactly.
And, I know he understands the rules, because I didn't even know the rules and the laws and stuff like that. But I understood the kid's fear. And I understood that if you're like literally afraid that you're going to die in that scenario, you're not going to remember the rules. You're not going to remember the laws. You're not going to remember whether you have rights or not. You're not going to remember any of that.
Well, that's perfect that you brought that up, because it's something that I've talked about with a couple of people. As you know, I'm former military, and I worked in a lot of kind of tactical training and things like that, and kind of been in some different situations. And then also I worked for the sheriff's department, not as a police officer, but I was basically sheriff deputy under corrections. And I had up close and personal interaction with police officers and trainers and different things like that. So I know when the officer is not handling the situation correctly, and I know certain trainings that I feel that they should have. One thing which a lot of people who haven't been in those types of situations, who don't understand it, you understand it from an emotional standpoint because it's happened to you. So when things like that happen to you, it's much easier to be sympathetic and see it from that person's perspective. But when you are not a person who experienced that, all you see is they're not listening to the officer in the way that they should be listening to the officer, not understanding certain scientific things, biological things about the human body. You have what's called auditory exclusion. Auditory exclusion, for instance, if you're in a room and you're listening to something super loud, you can hear how loud it is. But let something happen to you. Say you're on the phone with say a family member, and you hear that they might possibly be in harm's way. All of that, it completely goes away. You don't hear that sound anymore because your adrenaline completely takes over. What they don't realize is when you're an officer and you already have your adrenaline pumped up and you rush against somebody who's not expecting this type of violent reaction all of a sudden, and it's partially in disbelief, they're not quite hearing what you're saying. And in most situations you see, it's multiple officers yelling at the person at the same time. So it's very easy for your hearing to be distorted in what you're hearing at all. You might not even be hearing anything. It just turns into almost like Charlie Brown's teacher. And what these officers are not understanding is when you come in like that, you are heightening the situation and bringing on anxieties to people. Every human being has what we call flight or flight response. If you feel in danger, naturally in danger for your safety, you're going to want to try to get free from it. So even though you might not be physically fighting the officer, as in resisting them, you might just be trying to get away because your natural instinct is, this is what is going on. I need to get away from this. They're not factoring in these things and not addressing it. For instance, it takes nothing to call multiple officers out. So that shows you that there's no time limit on when this solution needs to be dealt with. I mean, when this problem needs to be dealt with. There's no reason that, okay, you got 10 officers there and then they bum rush you and throw you to the ground and start banging you around. There's no reason that you even need to do that. When you have those kind of numbers, all you literally have to do is walk up and surround the person. At that point, unless they're Bruce Lee or Neo or something like that, they're not going to try to have a problem with you. And the reason why this keeps going on is because there is no actual accountability, and they're not holding officers to any account because there's so much what's the word I guess where they feel like there's if they're family, a brotherhood, and
Yeah.
that brotherhood extends past the police officers to the local city council. It extends to, the district attorney, to a lot of the what do you call it, the public defenders. Also, it extends all the way throughout the system. So you have a system which is naturally set and biased against you, and so until people start looking at all these different things, that they're not going to understand what's really going on with this problem. I mean,
You heard about the the Biden Bernie task force, right? Right. See, you laugh, right? Because it's pathetic, right?
yes.
I mean, the whole thing is just you know what it's you bring you brought up police officers being able to get away with it. I'm just like, he literally brought nothing to the table in regards to that, even though there's clear signs, there's people marching out in the street, there's clear signs people want the police defunded, they want the police abolished, and Seattle's making amazing inroads in the pulling, in the supposedly taxing Amazon, and cutting the police force by like 50% or something like that. So I was impressed by that, but the task force, no one's really impressed going forward. And I brought it up.
No, not at all.
And I brought it up earlier. I think someone pointed out like the black youth are like not cool with Biden, and they were like, 50, well, they just don't get it. And then I'm like, it's not that they don't, and I'm like, it's not that they don't get it. It's just that they're tired of the old people's inaction. And just they're tired of the old people's inaction and stupidity. They're tired, they're fed up with it. And when young people are fed up like that, that's not the time to say, wait for a more convenient season, or, we can do it later. We just need to get Biden in right now. I'm just like, no, we need like radical sweeping change. And Democrats with the task force, they still don't get it.
Well, since you brought it up,
sure,
I'll go into I'll go in, deep on the thoughts. Hey, it's our platform tonight. Today it's just you and me. So we're just gonna have a fun little conversation and just be straight blunt with some of the things. One philosopher, his name is escaping me right now, but he had kind of a very pessimistic kind of philosophy. I'm not inviting anybody to take that philosophy necessarily, but I feel like it's important to hear these different ways of looking at it and thinking things. And he was saying that he basically came to a point, looking at the world around him and the absurdity of just how ridiculous everything is. He literally was speaking about a time which in his day was just like right now. We're talking about like the early 1900s. He was talking about where you had the wealthy on one hand who had, massive amounts of excess. And then you had the impoverished who are suffering, who, when they have diseases, it's always, how much money do you have? And there was all of these different just horrible things that were going on. if a wealthy person went missing, they were always searched for, and even the poor people were forced to almost get involved, in the community and help search for them. When it was the poor people, nobody cared. And his philosophy kind of went into, you know, if you are if you're happy about everything, then good for you. If you're not happy, then good for you. If you kill yourself, it doesn't matter. If you stay alive, it doesn't matter. It was basically like the first person who came up with the "you damned if you do, you damned if you don't." And that's how I've looked at this whole political system. I have to just sit back and like laugh at it because it's almost become a complete caricature of what democracy is supposed to be. Not Plato, but Socrates, one of the biggest problems that he had with democracy was that he felt that if you didn't have an educated voter base, then it's almost pointless.
Exactly.
Because you just have voting for the sake of voting. Exactly. I mean, he made the parable of like, if you were going to go out to sea, wouldn't you want a whole crew of seasoned fishermen to take you out to sea? Or would you want, wine merchants? And it's kind of like, we've been happy with hearing the sweet stuff that sounds good for so long. And so many people are just taking the wine merchant. And they've gotten accustomed to the ship not making it to where it needs to and sinking and having all these problems. Instead of deciding to actually get mariners involved to sell you to the proper destination in a correct and safe manner. And if you go into, these older people and they're talking about the young people need to do this and they need to listen to that, and which is vote Biden and we'll do this, we'll do that. The nonsense behind that is every single revolution in the entire world, every one. And I don't care if you go back to 1 BC, 2 BC, 3 BC, Christ time, every single revolution happened from the youth. The youth pushed all the revolutions, always. Mm-hmm. And what happens, and the reason why the youth pushes the movements is because enough of them have decided that they see what's really going on and they're not going to take it anymore. And the older people have decided to take it. Mm-hmm. And so after you start taking something for so long, it gets harder to break away from that type of abuse. For instance, if a woman is with a guy, or vice versa, it can be a man who's being attacked, or whatever couple. We'll just say two people are together. One of them starts beating the other one. If they leave right then and there, it stops that abuse. But if you stay continuously, you start justifying in your head why this abuse is okay and it's not quite what people think it is, or you can change it. And I see the Democratic Party, most of the older voters are that abused spouse.
Yeah.
They're just been beat and slapped and told to just accept things. And what they're trying to do is they're thinking, well, we figured out a way around it. So what we'll do is we'll listen to them and we're going to do what they say, but we're just going to keep begging them. And if we beg them, that'll work. And they're trying to convince us that that's a theory that should actually work. When people tell me that, well, at least we'll get Trump out of there. Here's my thing. Trump is an idiot. I know every day Trump is in office, Trump is conning the American people. And I don't mean conning just in tricking people. I mean conning as an actual stealing money and enriching himself. And his family is enriching himself. And his whole entire administration, they are grifters. They are stealing. I know that's what they're doing. And I know another 4 years of them is another 4 years of them completely grifting the United States. But I also know 4 years of Biden will be his part grifting the United States the same entire way, because they're all funded by a lot of the same people.
Right. And they take money from the same people.
It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of, well, do you want ranch or do you want creamy ranch? That's basically the difference. And a lot of the older people, because they bought into the rhetoric, They don't get the difference in it. I honestly, this is on a very unpopular opinion, but I look at Trump like this: is Trump has done what? First Step Act. Okay, he what bombed Iran. He did take out Soleimani. Didn't agree with that. Okay, he's what had his little North Korea thing, which kind of turned into nothing. He's pulled out of the Iranian deal. Okay, he's repealed some Obama stuff, and what tax cuts. He's misappropriated a whole lot of money for a wall. He's tried to put in a whole bunch of racist bills, which have all gotten slapped down by the Supreme Court. What I see is somebody who really doesn't have a coherent agenda or strategy, who is just putting up things by the moment. One thing gets in or it doesn't get in. That's what Trump does. What you have with Biden is you're going to have a concerted team of psychopaths who will be ravaging us in various different ways, which we are not even going to see coming. Right. For instance, when I was back home on the local level in Kansas City, I helped try to organize people to fight against what was called the ghostwriter tax. Now, what the ghostwriter tax was is for all the people who didn't pay their utility bills, they were going to make up a law so that remaining money would be distributed amongst the paying customers who did not have bills. I mean, who did not have outstanding balances as a minor tax every single month until it's paid off. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You want us to have to pay for somebody else's debt that we didn't accrue, which you are going to charge off anyway and make more money back off of it? No, that's not fair. And so I tried to organize people, and they would get to the point where they literally start moving the meetings around. Like it was at the state capitol. I was in Kansas City. So Kansas City, Kansas to the state capital, Topeka, is probably about, I want to say maybe a little over an hour. They literally start moving the meetings to like midnight and 3 a.m. to try to keep the numbers down of people who were there, to protest them and fight against them. I mean, that's the kind of stuff which you're going to have under a Biden. It's going to be behind closed doors. He's going to be saying, oh, but we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I asked all these people who say, well, just vote for Biden. I say, what leverage are you going to have that you don't have now?
Exactly.
That's going to help. I mean, and none of them have an answer. They just say, well, you're helping Trump. And then I tell them, you do realize I'm in California. I don't know how you think whatever I do, whether I voted for Biden, don't vote for Biden, voted for Captain Kangaroo, it is not going to make any difference in the presidential election.
So, yeah, I didn't expect much from the task force when I remember weeks ago when I first saw the team, and I was just like, there's just no way we're going to get anything really.
It's a show. It's all a show.
Right, it was all a show. And the COVID task force that Trump created or whatever, I was just like, it's all performance. It's all it's all a show. He literally wasn't going to do anything, and sure enough, everything got worse. Even though Trump created like this entire task force of people, I was like, he's got had a whole bunch of just evil, horrible people on it. And I was just
hold on 1 second. I forgot to do this, and I apologize. I want to throw a shout out to Black Bernie Babe. She checked in and she said hello to us on there in the chat. So I wanted to make sure I said hello to her and appreciated her for, stopping in with us. Hopefully she'll hop on with us one of these times and get into discussion. We always have fun little debates on Twitter. So, shout out to her and thank you. So back to what you were saying, Manuel.
No, I was saying, there was supposedly, Trump supposedly created a task force to handle the reopening of America in regards to the coronavirus. And I'm just like, given what's been happening within like the last month or so, I'm just like, you know.
See, the reason why these task force and all the reason why I can't even focus on any of that is you remember a few months back I did a video on COVID and reopening right after the whole Michigan protesters thing.
I didn't see
And
it.
yeah, I'll send you that video.
Okay.
And in the video, I put a little clip from an interview from a survivor of the Spanish American War, in 1917, and his account was so harrowing, and so, I felt that people need to actually hear these kind of stories and accounts so they can have, a focus on what possibly might happen. Not saying that it necessarily will or not, but what he described in that time, that one story that he said that people would literally come and knock on the door, completely distraught in tears, and they would tell you that their mother just died. And then you would have somebody else knock on the door, that afternoon or that evening, and they would tell you that whole entire family was dead, and I hope with every fiber of my being that we are able to, figure this thing out and avoid it, much before it gets to that point. But, I feel if you are not listening to those types of stories and at least taking them seriously, I almost don't even know how to talk to a person like that, because I feel like your paramount safety should be your first priority. Keeping yourself alive and healthy should be first thing before you focus on anything else. And if you're focusing on, well, I need to get back to making money and how a mask might make you look or feel, over the possibility that, granted, you could be lucky and you could, have it full on and, go through the worst of the worst and completely come back. You could be asymptomatic and completely doesn't affect you at all. But you could also be like, some of those med students, well, not med students, but young, I guess, medical staff who were in New York, who were literally, they had been tested like the day before, 2 days before, didn't have a positive test, walked straight out of the hospital and just collapsed, back in the ER, critical condition, and then passed away that night or the next day. So if to take that kind of risk and gamble, granted, you could be one of those people who feel like, what, it doesn't matter what we do. We're kind of, screwed regardless, because how far, that the virus can travel airborne and all those types of things like that. And that maybe our face coverings are not adequate enough. So yes, you can have all those types of arguments, but to not even try to take some of the basic, simple things that could help, protect you. I can't understand that kind of mentality. And especially these people who are doing it all for a political statement. You got to realize Donald Trump, one of my friends at work, he pointed this out to me. Donald Trump, when he was doing his speech in front of the church, when everybody didn't have any masks on, there was one person who did have a mask on, Ivanka Trump. She had a mask on, and then I guess once they got to the picture area, she took the mask off. And what that shows is that even behind closed doors, Trump was always a little concerned and worried about this. But for some dumb, stupid reason, he felt, I have to make this a partisan issue. And I think that he is going to massively suffer from it. I honestly think that's the reason why the task force are a complete joke. Trump is making it so easy for probably the most worthless candidate I've ever seen, run on the Democratic ticket. I literally, and I will debate anybody else who disagrees with me on this topic. Joe Biden, his record has literally been the worst for the Black community and the Latino community in my lifetime, bar none. I'm almost 40 years old. So he has been literally the most destructive force in, say, 40 to almost 50 years of politics from the Democratic side. Um, and for people to say, well, just put him in there, and well, he changed with Obama. How did he change with Obama? Obama is the boss. All he's doing is doing what Obama tells him to do. That's not him changing. That's him following orders. It's a difference. When you are actually in, like, for instance, when I was in the military, I followed orders all the time. But if you put me in charge, yeah, there are things I'm going to do differently. And it's the same thing with Biden.
Talking about pushing him left, I'm like, you're not pushing Biden left.
Well, you have to look. This is what I tell people. Look at Biden before he was vice president. Look at his record then. You have to, and I'm not even saying go all the way back to his earlier days. You look at up until, the 2000s when he's a senator. The only thing you can look back to is that, yes, he wanted to be with Bush on helping privatize Social Security. Yes, he was for the Iraq War. He had no problem with torture. He was one of the people who pushed against impeaching Bush, which Pelosi, there were people in the streets marching, wanting Bush, impeached for war crimes, for lying about the Iraq War, for drones, for all the civilian deaths and casualties. There were so many things, and she couldn't pull the trigger to impeach him for that when she had the country mostly behind her. But she can impeach Trump, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not defending Trump. I think Trump was wrong in what he was trying to do, but it's really no different than who you would put as our nominee right now. So you just completely muddied the waters on your own self and gave yourself no credibility, what you're coming out. I mean, what I've seen is the Democrats, or I'll say Democratic leadership, have just done nothing but destroy their credibility. This has been the year of just burn up the credibility.
Yeah, they want, if you had told me during, George W. Bush's time that the Democratic Party would go out of their way to vindicate or even sanitize George W. Bush now, I would have laughed in your face. Exactly. Because he was really that bad. And everybody's like, oh, well, we'll never do that with Trump. And I was like, it's a small world, 5 or 10 years. Who knows? There might be someone way worse than Trump. And the media and the Democrats will vindicate him simply because there's someone worse than him. And I fear that day more than anything in my entire life, because people think it can't happen, that we're not situated for that to happen. I'm like, you put Biden in, we're definitely gonna go on that path, and I really hate the outcome of what's going to come from that. So
yeah, I mean that's why I've kind of leaned towards accelerationist theory. If for those listening who don't know what accelerationist theory is it's the theory of believing that things have to get worse before they get better. In a nutshell, what I've learned and realized, especially, if you look at how the like what Manuel brought up earlier with the whole Black Lives Matter protests, and how they've kind of hijacked it and turned it into a caricature of what it was before. And that's the same thing that was done with the Civil Rights March and a lot of other things throughout history. It started off with actual revolution, and then it was always corrupted or taken over or, managed, in some kind of way. And that's the same thing which is going on all over again, And the problem is, I just don't think it's going to serve them this time. I really think that the younger generation, and with the technology that we have,
the reach
and technology and how fast, it's like you cannot you can shut down this channel or that channel every now and then. You can keep, and since I'm going to post this on, Twitter, of course, you guys can keep shadow banning me and giving me my limited accesses and all these things that you guys love to do to me. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to change my message. You're not going to intimidate me. Um, and I hope all of us will take that approach, that we will always push back and not allow people to force us into a belief system, or force us to do something against the way our principles guide us to. I mean, somebody brought up an interesting question, or actually, sorry. Before I go into that, I want to bring up one little story. Um, my mother, I was having a conversation with her, and we were talking about some different things, and I've noticed, to my joy, that she has started kind of looking at things a little bit differently on some of the candidates in politics, which she's kind of favored, or different opinions or approaches. And uh, I asked her the question. I said, "Is it the problem? Is the problem that the Democrats are always stopped by Republicans, or is it that the Democrats are not being effective enough at getting done what they need to?" I said, because I wanted to reword it and think about it differently, instead of saying, well, the Democrats are just completely bought and sold out. Because a lot of times when you're trying to talk to somebody who's not quite as in depth on all the information that we are, they don't see what we're seeing. And so we sound like lunatics sometimes when we come on too strong. And so I wanted to come across a little bit softer and say, well, why aren't they getting these things done? And I said, think about it like this, Mom. If you were hiring somebody for anything, after a certain amount of time of them failing, aren't you going to say, you know what, I need to replace you? I can't keep, you might be doing your best and you're trying, and I get it, but these are things that we need done and you're not getting them done. How long do you keep accepting people, not accomplishing the objectives that you have sent them there to do? And she kind of reflected and paused on that for a while, and I think that that's helped awaken a lot of things, and I feel that's the approach more so that some of our more, I guess, I don't even want to call them moderates. I don't really want to call them liberals. I want to call them not quite as informed as they think.
Right.
A lot of these people truly believe that they're informed, and that they are, engaged in everything that's going on in politics, because they are listening to all the stories, but they're not listening to anything with a critical lens. And they're doing a lot of this because this is what was taught to them. Most of these people are very religious. Whether you go through Christianity or any of the what do you call it? I can't even say the word, Abrahamic religions. Any of those religions, all the way across the board, most people sit and listen, and they spend their time trusting somebody else to decipher information for them and then give them an interpretation. Now, what they're not even thinking about is they're taking somebody's word on their interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation. In every single religion, it is always an interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation. And you're trusting somebody else to give you those answers. And it's the same thing which has happened in the political lens. Okay, I trust Fox News. So when I get on, I'm going to listen to Tucker Carlson, and whatever Tucker Carlson's saying is the gospel. I'm going to get on MSNBC, and Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes. Those are my people. So they seem kind of left. And you get what I'm saying? That's how a lot of this false conception about a lot of things go, because people are just taking like one version of accounts of things. Like, for instance, how many people do you know would know that the Catholic Church actually sanctioned, the slave trades? back in the let's see, what was it, like 15? Oh no, it was before Columbus, 1350s or something like that. Crazy. I mean, the Portuguese were transporting slaves, easily a good 60 something years before, before the whole, transatlantic slave trade got going. I mean, yeah, the Portuguese got involved, the Spanish got involved, and all of this was sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Church, which was which was tied in with pretty much every monarchy around the world, minus the empires within Asia and certain free parts of Africa still that hadn't been, colonialized or, the people enslaved.
Yeah. It's amazing, how many people don't know very much about our history until like what, high school, college, right? Because the books don't.
Or after college.
Yeah, the books don't teach you. The books don't teach you that. The books don't teach me. I was lucky to have, a black English teacher in high school who pointed out you always need to go to the library. You always need to look something up. You always need to double check back. You always need to look into stuff because white America is not going to tell you anything. If anything, they love for you to be ignorant. Being ignorant is like their greatest. It's like the best thing that's ever happened to them. Your ignorance is their power.
Well, that's one thing which you want. That's one thing which I noticed very interesting. If you go through, and I don't care which area you go through. I'm talking about definitely after the Egyptian periods. But if you go to the Greek philosophers, if you go to the Renaissance, time period, a lot of the philosophers and artists of that time period, and then you go on to the Enlightenment period, and then you go on to the philosophers of the early industrial age. The one thing that I see that all of these people have in common is they were either murdered, they were either sentenced to prison, they were either had all their lands and titles and everything stripped and taken from them. Um, all of these people basically became the enemy of the state, in which, if you think about it, going even from that time into people who were trying to speak out information in the early 1900s, and then you start getting into the civil rights era, the same people who were trying to speak out, all the different leaders, you had Martin Luther King, you had Medgar Evers, you had, even a Bobby Kennedy, you had so many people. Anytime they start trying to speak about, actual real issues, you know, I mean, you can literally go down the gamut. And the thing which I find interesting about majority of these people only spoke. They were not violent people. They didn't fight. They didn't encourage fighting. All they did was encourage you to seek knowledge. And what I find is the seeking knowledge is what the people at the top hate and fear the most. I mean, um, I might get myself into some trouble with some religious people here, but that's why they called certain. That's why where the word heretic came from, because they believe these people who believe other versions of Christianity, other books which the Orthodox Church rejected. They believe those people, were wrong, were false, were speaking blasphemy and all that. So they were called heretics, and that's where we get heresy and all that stuff from today. And that was one group of people deciding that one other group of people were completely wrong and they have to be completely ignored. And I mean, it goes into religions in general. None of us know for a fact whether there are higher power or there is not a higher power, or that there is a meaning or not. So therefore, none of us should feel entitled to tell somebody that they are wrong in their beliefs or that they need to think this or think that. I do say yes, you can encourage others to look at your point of view and to hear your information, but nobody should have to, necessarily swallow your information or definitely not be ruled by your religious doctrine.
Yeah. Totally
Well,
agree.
let's see, what else do we got? I guess that's about it. Did we? I guess I was gonna say. I guess I did put in the title Farrakhan, which I guess you don't have to specifically get into Farrakhan, but a little bit of things that I thought was interesting because I watched his Fourth of July segment, and I think it's very interesting, whether you agree with him or not on certain things. I invite people to definitely go look at it. And if you're like, for instance, I know, Manu, you're not you're an
I'm not
atheist.
religious. You're correct. I
Yeah.
mean, I did grow up religious. I was I was an altar server. I was in the Catholic Church. I was an altar server. I was a Boy Scout, and I didn't really start leaning into non-religion until I think like I would say like around high school. You know, 19, 20 years old until I started taking it like particularly seriously. So, but go on with what you were saying.
Yeah, I was saying that you know, people would get into sorry, hold on a second. Kind of lost my train for a second. Let me get a little sip. I was saying that though of course everybody knows that Nation of Islam, he's a Muslim, but I say even for those who are non-religious, I ask them to look at it and exclude the parts when he's talking about religion altogether, and just listen to some of the other points that he's talking about. And I think he makes some interesting points. One that I found interesting, he was saying be wary of Bill Gates and the vaccines and stuff like that. That he was going into some of the testing and things which they did in Africa and with Ebola and stuff like that. And so he's just saying, hey, if I'm you, I'd be a little wary. So, it's an interesting. It was an interesting speech. Some, of course, are going to find only the negative points of it or look at it in a negative light. But myself, I'm done with looking at things in that way. No bit of information is prohibited to me in my search for knowledge anymore. I feel like a weight is lifted off of me, starting to view things in a different way. And I invite and hope other people will open their minds also to doing the same. Um, Trump looks like he is getting beat like a rented mule, and it looks like
Yeah,
Biden
see the
is about to
thing.
be
Well,
president.
okay. See the thing about Trump with me is that I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think he's waiting for like Biden to get the nomination, and then he'll start doing like some stuff like right out of like completely out of nowhere, and I see that coming. Maybe I'm wrong, but
You could be right.
I
I
mean his
mean,
unpredictability is what
yeah,
frightens.
yeah. I mean, that is one thing about him. You just
He
Trump
knows
thinks
the
what he's
Democratic Party. He
doing.
was a Democrat. His unpredictability, he knows how those people think, and his unpredictability in regards to that frightens me.
Well, another thing is Trump is also known to be a counterpuncher in a sense, and I don't really even think that he's that great of a counterpuncher. I just think that his opponents are weak, and that's one sign of a lot of like when I used to box. That's one thing which a lot of that defines guys who a lot of times become champions or not become champions. Sometimes you be careful who you pick a fight with. And Trump picks his fights carefully with people who he knows that he can bully and beat up on. Part of why I think that he was definitely afraid of Bernie. Um, Bernie,
Murray would have beat him.
that's the only time where he would have faced somebody who would have been able to go at him unabashed 150%. While Bernie is within the Democrats, he's too afraid to go after, other Democrats. And I feel like that's always that's always Bernie's fatal flaw. Um, we can't move forward in this system and as a revolution if you are still tied to the Democratic Party. You can't move past them.
Right. I think Democrats seem to demand unity for nothing. They want your vote. They want unity. They don't want you to point out their criticisms, but they always, always, always want your vote. They want literally something for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my viewpoint, that's what they want. They literally want. They don't want to do anything, but they want your vote.
Yep.
And I've noticed in recent weeks, there's a pact that's been created. I think, for Republicans supporting Joe Biden. There's been talks where Joe Biden is starting to talk about compromising with the right and trying to figure out where they reach on the same page and everything. And all my thought is, why didn't he just do that for the left, like the actual left? Why didn't he just do that for them, right? Why? Because you saw it with Clinton too, right? I mean, it was performative. They worked, her and Bernie worked together, but she was still going to the right. She was still asking for the right's help. She was asking for the right support. And I'm like, if you had Bernie's team and you had Bernie's numbers and you were doing what Bernie's fans and constituents wanted, you wouldn't need their help. You wouldn't even have to ask because he had the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
He had the numbers. He had the people doing the groundwork and the ground game and everything. So when they talked about the task force, and then in the middle of them talking about the task force, they start saying Biden's compromised with the right. I'm like, okay, he didn't agree to anything he didn't agree to nothing. The task force is a joke. That's when I realized it. So this was even before we even found out was the results of the task force.
I just look at the staffing. I mean, this is what I look at. This tells me everything. I don't listen to your committees. I don't listen to your interviews. I don't even listen to any of that anymore. I look at your staffing. If you are staffing CEOs of different corporations, that tells me all I need to know. If most of your money is coming in from CEOs and the Fortune 500 and Wall Street and Silicon Valley, if that's where your resources and things are coming from, then for me, it's always been simple. Follow the money. You always follow the money.
Follow the money. Where's the money?
It's always, and the thing about it is, it's not even just people act like, well, you follow the money and that's just something now. You can go back through history, all the way back to the Egyptian periods. You can follow the money to why certain wars and invasions happened. It is always about money in some form or another, whether that is actually in gold, whether that is in spices, whether that is in salt, whether that is in petroleum, whether it's in coal, no matter what it's in, it's all the same thing. It's all about money. Jamal Thomas from the Progressive, I'm forgetting his show right now. Progressive Soapbox. He always says it's the stupid human trick to get the money. That's what all these other things are. Whatever you're selling and shipping and doing all this and doing all that, it's a stupid human trick you're doing to get money. It's always about the money. Let's see. Well, I guess we went on for a good amount of time. I guess we can kind of wrap this up. Anything that you wanted to tell the audience that you've been working on, that you've got planned?
Other than
I know for our show,
of course, our show, The Political Matrix. Looking into getting that up and running. I'm trying to get. I just recently did a podcasting interview with another person, on the autistic spectrum, such as myself. let's see. I'm trying to get a podcast up and running, but I can't seem to get the music down exactly. But I'm close. I'm closer than I was last week, so it'll probably be showing up on my front page, on my front Twitter page at some
I'll
point.
say
So
keep us updated so that that we can talk about it on the show and that we can promote your podcast too.
cool. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
See any other quick topics that you were thinking about that we missed?
No, I think we pretty much covered what's been going on.
Yeah.
They're cracking down on. I guess big tech is cracking down on like specific like problematic right wingers and stuff like that. But I guess that's been happening in like recent weeks, and of course, they're going back. They're going to like the. They're going to like the I guess the right wing version of Twitter now. I think it's called Parler or something like that. That's pretty much it from what all I can catch for right now. I mean, the majority of my time is like, realizing how many other ADHD and autistic people I see online, and they reach out and they talk to me, and I guess I didn't realize there were so many. So that takes up I definitely like dealing a lot more with that than I guess like with the actual political stuff. I mean, I know I've been doing it for a really long time, but sometimes I guess dealing with like the autistic and the ADHD world is kind of like, it's like a break. I mean, it gives me something else to work on, and then I can also work on this at the same time. So
Good.
I'd say that's all that's going on with me, man.
Yeah, me, I got my little news roundup thing that I'm gonna do, recorded on here shortly, hopefully to release probably tomorrow. Then I have a couple of shorter videos that I'm gonna do for this channel, what I've been thinking. Let the audience know some of the different topics that I wanted to kind of focus in on. This is going to be our regularly young Black leadership forum, and we'll talk about whatever the various hot topics here always. So this gives us a time to talk about everything in a more expanded setting. But my other videos are going to start being a little bit, and try to keep them shorter and shorter on what I've been thinking. And then on the political matrix, I haven't checked with Manuel yet. Hopefully you've been able to log in.
I'm going to do it right after this. The Green Party nomination thing kind of.
Yeah, I didn't even want to talk about that one.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot there, and then me and Niall were talking about some of it yesterday, and I was just there's a lot going on there, but I've been looking into that for like last couple of days. I'm gonna do it like literally right after.
Yeah, I just want to have that because I don't know if our audience is necessarily heard, or I don't know if I've said it or not, but I'll say it again because I want everybody to know. We will have our weekly segment where it will be myself, it will be Emmanuel, and it will be Chris also. And we'll be going through our different topics in an expanded context just like this. But I'm trying to get it set up where my other fellow co-hosts, Manuel and Christopher, will be able to upload their various videos on minor little topics that are all going to feed into what we're going to be talking about in our conversations. Some of it might tie into that week in particular. Some of it may not tie into that week in particular. But we all will be uploading content individual content. My content is going to focus more from the philosophical approach and psychological approaches, and looking at politics from just a completely different way, because I came to a point where I realized that I need to start understanding people and understanding myself better, to be able to communicate to people better, to maybe be able to get more understanding on the point of views and policies that we're trying to accomplish. Um, so that'll be my segment. Chris will be breaking down various important historical, content, which he'll decide which he wants to bring to you guys, and then it's all open to my good brother Manuel here, what he'll decide that he wants to give you guys. So that's all I have. Without further ado, thank you guys all for joining me, especially on this Patreon stream. It's my first time, well, not Patreon, Periscope, sorry. First time I've ever done the whole Periscope thing, and I am going to eventually try to tie them all together so I have these multiple streams going, and you guys will be able to find me here and on YouTube also, for my channel, What I've Been Thinking with Marcus Cage, and the Political Matrix. I guess that's all we have. I know I blabbed a lot. Next time we'll try to keep it a little shorter. Hope you guys all have a good one, and have a safe and healthy week. All right, you guys have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
All right.